Hey Twitch, we are back, AWS Summit Santa Clara. I'm Brandon West. I've got some awesome guests today. We're going to talk about some networking stuff, which I'm super stoked on. You can't have the internet without networks, right? So it's good stuff. So yeah, let's start with introductions. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Narayan Subramaniam, and I'm a senior manager with the Elastic Load Balancing team. I'm super excited to be here. We're going to be launching some real cool, powerful features on the application load balancer with advanced content-based routing. So I'm here to announce it and talk more about it.
Great.
Hi, I'm Eric Levon, the product manager with AWS Direct Connect. Really excited to be talking about some of our great new features that we're bringing on out to help customers.
Cool.
I'm Alejandra, and I'm one of the dev evangelists, and I'm here to have fun.
Woohoo! All right. I think we're all here to have fun.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's really what we're here for.
Totally.
All right, cool. So let's just briefly outline all of the things that we're going to talk about, right? So we're going to talk about Direct Connect and a new thing that's launched for that, which is multi-account support. Then we're going to talk about the thing you mentioned, which is the header-based routing for elastic load balancing. Don't worry if you don't know what any of this means. We're going to explain what some of these concepts and services are. And then we're going to talk again about some new gigabit connections that are enabled on AWS Direct Connect. So let's start off with the multi-account Direct Connect gateway. So I guess a good way to lead into that is what is Direct Connect for the people out there on Twitch who are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
Direct Connect does what?
That's a great way to start. So Direct Connect is a cloud service solution that enables customers to establish dedicated connections to AWS services. And using Direct Connect, customers can establish private connections from their data center, offices, or co-location environments to AWS. In many cases, Direct Connect reduces costs, enables higher bandwidth throughput, as well as provides for a more consistent experience than as compared to internet connections. Now, Direct Connect Gateway works with AWS Direct Connect to enable you to access virtual private clouds in any AWS region from any AWS Direct Connect location worldwide, and that excludes regions and locations in China. Direct Connect Gateway previously supported associating a VPC owned by the same AWS account to a Direct Connect Gateway. And with the new multi-account Direct Connect Gateway service that we have launched, it allows you to associate AWS VPCs owned by different AWS accounts with a Direct Connect Gateway.
Cool. So the way I like to think about Direct Connect is that it's a really easy way to start adding cloud to your existing infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
And I think this was something that Comcast did with Xfinity. When they launched their DVR, digital DVR,
That's correct.
they used Direct Connect to hook up to AWS to get some extra provision capacity to meet the demands of their launch.
Yes.
Cool. So what customer use cases are enabled by allowing these multiple accounts to be used?
Yeah, so a good example is a customer growth story, where a customer may start off with AWS initially hosting a financial application, and they're launching that within a VPC. And then as they migrate additional workloads over to AWS, they want to add additional VPCs. And so Direct Connect Gateway allows the customer to easily associate additional VPCs over time without having to greatly change how they have configured their connectivity to AWS.
All right. So in addition to that multi-account support, having multiple VPCs, is there anything else that customers that are interested in this feature should know?
Yeah, so I think one thing to point out is that there's no incremental cost associated with using Direct Connect Gateway.
Okay.
So, and that's true of the multi-account support as well. So customers may continue to add additional VPCs at will. They will pay data transfer out fees, as they do today, associated with any use of Direct Connect Gateway.
All right. Well, I think it's time to move on to talk about some load balancing now. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, totally. Let's go for it.
Cool. So let's start off again with some high-level concepts.
What is load balancing?
Sure, yeah, I think that's the right place to start, right? So Elastic Load Balancing distributes incoming requests to your backend application stacks, right? Like be it on EC2 instances or containers, IP addresses, or even Lambda-based functions. And today, we have three types of load balancers. We have an application load balancer, we have network load balancer, a classic load balancer, and an application load balancer works at the layer 7. So if you think about it, it's load balancing HTTP, HTTPS requests. It works at the individual request level. And in that sense, it has content-based routing features where it can load balance or route a particular request to a backend based on the content in the header, right? And then we have network load balancer, which runs at the layer 4 level, and it's load balancing TCP-based requests and TLS, right? But where NLB comes in is, or the network load balancer comes in is, when customers need extreme performance and they're looking at volatile traffic patterns, that's where NLB is used. And finally, we have the older generation classic load balancer, which primarily, customers should be leveraging it only when they are using the older classic networking instead of using VPCs.
Yeah. So real quick, when you say levels, layer 7, layer 4,
sure.
Just briefly for our audience, what layers are you referring to there?
Sure, this is the OSI model, basically, of networking, where layer 7, it's more related to HTTP, HTTPS. And when we talk about layer 4, we're talking about more the transmission protocol, which is the TCP traffic.
Yeah, so the higher the higher the layer, the more abstracted away it is from the bits
it's
actually going through the wire.
More application layers versus more at the networking layer.
Cool. So now that we have this arbitrary header-based routing based on the contents of the headers that come in on a request, what does it enable for customers?
Sure. I think the big piece that we're actually going to be announcing today is the ability for customers to be leveraging what we call as the advanced request routing feature on the application load balancer. This will allow a customer to basically use any part of the HTTP header and use that to actually route their requests, right? And this includes things like query parameters, or you could also leverage the HTTP methods like posts, gets, and in addition, you could also leverage the source IP CIDR range and also use that to be actually routing your requests. Now the big advantage there is that previously, customers needed to use their own proxy fleet to be able to do this, or they needed to do this at the application layer. But now, bringing that to the application load balancer itself, customers can do this all on the load balancer rather than doing it on their application stack. The second big advantage of doing something like this is that customers could now be focusing completely on their business logic, right, and leave the routing to the load balancer. And then I think the other big benefit that they couldn't do previously is that by having routing on the load balancer itself, it takes away a lot of the complexity out of the backend application stack, right? And now you could actually have microservice-based architectures and have the load balancer use these headers, query params, methods, or the source IP, and then route the request to individual microservices. And thereby, I think it improves the overall flexibility of the customer architectures, making it more powerful.
Yeah, I think if you are starting with a big monolithic app that you've architected that's maybe 10 years old, and you want to start embracing some of these new design patterns like microservices, this gives you a very powerful way to take that existing legacy application and just carve off a little piece of it to try out that microservices thing, start migrating step by step.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
So how about we do a quick demo? I think you're going to show us how we can set up one of these advanced routing requests.
Exactly. Yeah. But the one thing I just wanted to quickly call out was some of the typical use cases, right, that this feature actually enables. Now, if you think of a typical HTTP application, you have what we call user agents, right, in the HTTP header itself. Now think of it as you could have either a customer application, or a use case could be, I want to separate out my bot traffic versus human traffic, right? And then I want to use the user agents to route them to a specific application, and then I want to customize the experience I give them based on the user agent, right? So that's one very good use case that gets unblocked by this, right?
Yeah.
Another typical one is you could use these HTTP headers or the query parameters to unblock applications like A/B testing, or some kind of blue-green deployments, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're doing canary testing, that's another use case that this unblocks. The other one, is because you're leveraging the client source IP, CIDR range, what you could also do is you could block certain requests based on those IPs right at the load balancer without needing those requests to actually hit your backend application. So you could block them right there, right? And I just wanted to quickly show a demo of how this is set up on the application load balancer. So all of these features we spoke about are part of the rules definition that exists within the load balancer. So as you can see in this screen here, the HTTP header, the request method, query string, source IP are all shown here. You could pretty much go in, and now what you could also do is set up multiple conditions within the same rule. Right, this wasn't available before, but now what you could do is you could have an HTTP request method.
This will save you a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Time
And
saving.
now you could condense those rules, right? You could have more of these conditions within the same rule. You could also have multiple values within the same rule. So as you can see here, we have multiple conditions that we are setting up in this particular demo. And now let me take you very quickly to some of the actual application spaces, right? So here is a demo where what we're going to show you is you can use the user agent to go in and I can show you how it looks. So in this case, I'm using Mozilla, right? And that's how it shows up. Now, if I'm using Internet Explorer, based on the user agent, that's the experience I've got, right? Now, there is another demo here, basically where I'm using the query string parameters to show a customized experience, right? I'm using it, it's a dog theme.
Is that
here.
a dog?
Yeah, that's
Can we scroll down and look at the dog?
Actually, yes. Look at that. We love dogs and cats, right? So,
Yes, we do.
So right here, this is a light theme based on a query parameters, right? The other one is if you are using a get and a put method, right? Here is the get method. I just did that, and now you're actually going to get a cat, right? That's a get method.
Your demo is amazing.
And then you have a post here, right, where I could say, give me the weather in Seattle. So I'm inputting I'm inputting this value into my backend application, and then it loads, and it's actually going to give me the weather in Seattle, for example, right? So that's, I think, going to make the whole experience from an architecture perspective very powerful for our customers.
Definitely agree. Do you have any recommendations for best practices? Because I can see this being a situation where, as the app developer, I don't really like to mess around with the network stuff.
Yeah.
I used to, but I prefer to focus on code now.
Yes.
Something like this could mean that as an app developer, some change outside of my domain could result in different behavior. Do you have any best practices for sort of governance or control, how you would roll out these kinds of changes?
I think the key thing there would be to ensure that you're thinking through your architecture, right? What do you want to actually move to the load balancer layer, more fronting your stack, right? And which pieces do you actually want to keep within your application? So for most part, things like your routing and how do you get your performance, the scalability, the availability aspect, right, is what the load balancer brings to the mix, right? And so that's how I would actually think about the architecture.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. Time to talk more about Direct Connect, I think, yeah? So
Why don't we start with, what is Direct Connect?
well, I think we did that earlier, right?
Did we?
We did that with multi-account.
My bad.
No worries.
Yeah. So we know what Direct Connect is. It's how you connect your on-premises or existing infrastructure directly to a VPC.
That's correct.
What are we announcing today in addition to the multi-account support?
Yeah, so in addition to multi-account support, I'm here to talk about support for higher capacities. And we've had higher capacities available 1 and 10 gigabits per second through our dedicated connection product. And we're also making available those higher capacities of 1 to 5 and 10 gigabits per second available through Direct Connect partners exclusively. And so a little bit about Direct Connect partners and how they help customers. So you mentioned that you prefer to focus on the application and you prefer not to pay so much attention to the nuts and bolts of networking. And this is where Direct Connect partners come in. They really take a lot of the work of establishing a connection, a dedicated connection to AWS from the customer and really help you focus on your application and what matters most to your business.
Cool.
In addition to our capacities of 50 to 500 megabits per second that we've had exclusively through Direct Connect partners, those new 1, 2, 5, and 10 gigabit per second capacities provide additional options for customers, especially at the high end of their network connectivity needs.
That's a lot of bandwidth. I'm trying to think, and I'm sure there's tons and tons of great use cases for why you would need that high speed of a connection.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have built it because our customers are asking for it. That's why it exists. Can you tell me about some ways that some customers are using that big of a pipe?
Yeah, well, one use case is transferring a large amount of data from the customer premises to AWS. So you might imagine a customer could have a need to archive a bunch of data to Glacier at the end of every month. And they might need a large amount of capacity, network capacity, to do that in a very short amount of time. They might have a very narrow time window in which to do that. And so one of the benefits of hosted connections is it enables customers to provision that connectivity or that capacity on demand, use that capacity for the duration of their migration event, and then once they're done, they can free up that capacity for other uses after that and stop paying for it.
Cool. That sounds like more bandwidth than I would ever know what to do with, but I'm also not an enterprise corporation, so that probably makes sense.
Yeah, well, maybe tomorrow you might have a lot of cat videos that you want to upload, and then that capacity is there for you if you need it.
Yeah, even when I was managing my illicit MP3 FTP servers that I mentioned on stream about half an hour ago, I didn't need anywhere near that much bandwidth.
Well, I won't ask any more questions about that.
It's probably for the best. You never know who's listening.
That's right.
So if I wanted to upgrade my direct connection, direct connect line, what's the cost looking like here?
Yeah, so you're welcome to add additional hosted connections as you wish. The costs are similar to what we currently have for our dedicated connection products. All of our pricing, dedicated connection, hosted connections is by the hour that the connection is used. And we've also reduced our prices for the existing 200, 300, 400, and 500 megabit per second hosted connection capacities.
That's awesome. Customers do love when we lower prices.
Absolutely, and we're happy to do it.
Never had them ask us to raise them, which is weird, but we also never have, so that's cool.
That's good.
All right. Anything else that the Twitch audience should know about Direct Connect?
Yeah, I think another comparison between dedicated connections and hosted connections. Dedicated connections, they're a physical port that we allocate to a customer. And when a partner helps a customer access that physical port, they do so by running a cable to that physical port and then extending that connection to the customer's premises. So that can take a fair amount of time to complete, anywhere from days to hours to weeks, depending upon the total work. Hosted connections, much more rapid. Those are provisioned over capacity that's established between AWS and the Direct Connect partner in advance. So that's one of the other advantages of hosted connections.
Cool, and it's also, I'm guessing it gives you some good latency since it's direct,
yes,
right? As the name implies.
Right, and so yeah, I think comparing Direct Connect to the public internet, that is one of the major advantages, that more consistent latency over the variability of internet connections.
Cool. And Direct Connect there are specific Direct Connect locations.
That's correct. We have 91 locations worldwide.
Okay, good to know. Well, I think we're just about wrapping up then. Is there anything else, either on the load balancing side, on the Direct Connect side, just in general? Alejandra, you having fun?
I am. I'm kind of curious. Can we just have a quick list of examples of partners that are using your gigabit hosted connection?
Yeah, so we're still working with partners to try to get them enabled for the service. So we'll be publishing on our website partners as they are able to provide access to those connections.
Cool.
Okay, so they should look out for those updates there.
On our website, correct.
What's the website?
aws.amazon.com/directconnect/partners.
Sweet, there we go.
Cool. And on the load balancing side, any calls to action, any parting words of wisdom about how to, in general, how to architect things with load balancers?
Yeah, I mean in general, right? Like I think we continue to ensure that we can, keep going the scalability, the availability, making our content-based routing features more scalable and more richer. And we'll continue to do that, right? Like make the load balancers more powerful and allow customers to be able to offload a lot to the load balancing itself. And if you need any more details on it, go to aws.amazon.com/elastic load balancing, and we'll have a lot of details around whatever we spoke about just now.
And I just want to reiterate that you should not be using the classic load balancer unless you have a very good reason.
Yeah.
Just ignore that part of the webpage unless your boss says you really need to read it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Application load balancer and the network load balancers are where the future is, and that's where customers should be, using right now.
Cool. Well, Alejandro, you said we were here to have fun. I think we had a whole bunch of fun.
I mean, that demo was fun.
Yes.
Kudos to whoever helped you build the demo.
Cats,
yeah,
right?
totally.
Although I'm not sure, that cat didn't look like a real cat. I'm still It's haunting me a little bit. That's all right. Cool. So yeah, are there any sessions that your team is presenting here at the event for people that might actually be tuning in from the convention floor?
Not any
No,
on the
not right
ELB
now?
side. No,
All
nothing
right,
on
cool.
the ELB side.
Well, thank you both very much,
Yeah,
Eric
thank
and
you.
Ryan, for joining
Thanks
us
a lot.
and
Thank you.
launching some new features right here on Twitch. Always good time. Alejandra, thank you for joining. And Twitch, stay tuned. We've got more great content coming up from Santa Clara.